So our next one, all right, we're still on the energy kick, okay? Carbohydrates are the primary energy source. However, lipids come in as a close second. Now, what do we need to know about lipids? First of all, lipids are made up of the same three elements as carbohydrates: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, okay? Now, what are the different types of lipids? Well, we're going to think of fats. We're thinking of oils. Okay, bacon, all of those kind of things has fats in it. But we also want to think phospholipids. That's going to be cell membrane, folks. All right, so now we're dealing with lipids, and those lipids are going to be part of the cell membrane. So now we're already starting to make reference to building parts of the cell. Now, the last one is steroids, the hormones. We talked about an example of this. This was the testosterone. And estrogen. All right, so functions of lipids, all right? One thing that you need to know is that lipids do not form polymers, okay? And that kind of gives lipids their kind of chemical property characteristics. Oftentimes we see fats being pretty soft, malleable, or even liquid at room temperature. And that is because one lipid molecule can't bond with another lipid molecule. When you see this butter here, it's literally these fat molecules just stuck together and not really with one another here. Okay, now when we talk about the structure of a lipid, it has two main parts that you need to know about. The top part, this is what we call the glycerol. And then these chains, all right, these chains are what we call fatty acid chains. Now, what these are is the energy sources, all right? The main goal of lipids, all right, the main function of lipids is long-term energy storage. Life has definitely evolved to know that in the past, or even organisms today, a meal's not guaranteed every day. The environment's always changing. And so it stores this energy in these lipid or fat molecules so that it can be used during times of low glucose times. Now, where is this energy being stored at? I'm going to put this down here. Energy is stored in the CH bonds. And if we kind of take a look at the lipids here, there is a lot of CH bonds. CH bond, CH bond, CH bond. We can just keep going crazy. And these chains can go so long. But every time one of these bonds are broken, it releases energy. Bam, energy, bam, energy. So these, because of that CH bond, they give us these long-term energy storage. And again, we call them hydrocarbons. That's the same thing as saying CH bonds there. To this picture right here. So this molecule that we see here is what we refer to as a triglyceride. So you're going to see that on the bottom of your note packets right there. Find this molecule and go ahead and label it a triglyceride. Now, that is one form a lipid can take. And now, besides lipids being let's go back. This one is going to be that of cholesterol, or otherwise known as steroid hormones. Okay, so steroids are used for chemical messengers, but they take on more of this this ring type of shape. It has these carbon rings with them. But anytime you see those carbon rings, kind of just know that we're talking about lipids. Also, these steroids also are part of the phospholipid, the cell membrane, and they help keep the cell membrane now. Now, the last one is the phospholipids. That's what this structure right here is for. But if you take later science classes, you'll learn that often because of this structure that it has those fatty acid chains, and it has that because, well, this portion of the cell membrane is hydrophobic because of those fatty acid chains. So because of that fat that's in it, it gives it a hydrophobic nature. This is why oil and water doesn't mix, because of that hydrophobic nature. But because of this hydrophobic nature, this can control what can go into and out of the cell. So this is going to help with homeostasis of the cell as well. So now we're starting to see a picture being formed of how these molecules are being utilized to build our cell organism. All right. Our next one is going to be proteins. When you think of proteins, where do we think of proteins coming from? Meat, all right? And so protein is needed for a lot of things, but in particular for structure, function, muscle building. So what elements does proteins make up of? Well, they have carbon, they have oxygen, they have oxygen, and they have nitrogen. So they are chown molecules. Now, these do have a monomer and polymer. So when we talk about proteins, the monomer or building block of a protein is what we call an amino acid. Now, the amino acid kind of has three main parts to it: an amine group, essential carbon, a carboxyl group, but it also has this group right here called the variable group. Now, this part right here gives the amino acids their properties, and we're going to talk about those properties a little bit later when we get into protein folding during protein formation, protein synthesis, ribosomes, and the such. However, what these amino acids can do is that they can form peptide bonds between each of them and form our polymer. Now, the technical name for our polymer is what we call a polypeptide. And that makes sense because poly means many, and well, there's many of these peptide bonds connecting these amino acids. Okay? Is that they have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, but they have one other one that sets it apart as being a protein, and that is sulfur. Okay? So now, what is it used for? First one is enzymes. We're going to be talking about enzymes a lot more in the upcoming weeks here, but enzymes help with a lot of chemical reactions. And so we're already going back and reaching about metabolism and energy, which is one of our characteristics of life. Here we get structural support. This helps build the framework of the cell, gives it its shape. Transportation. So these are going to be in the cell membrane, pigments, and also, of course, muscles. Back. Sulfur. Now, there are 20 different amino acids, and we're going to get to know those amino acids a little bit more later on. But one thing that you want to kind of know and put down for right now is this, that each combine in different sequences or in different orders of these amino acids to form unique protein structures. And so we're going to later learn that these proteins, depending on how they fold, determines how they function. Now, what are the atoms involved with this? Okay, so big thing is that with proteins, allows us to be, if anything has sulfur in it, it's automatically an amino acid, because sulfur is only located in proteins. All right, now our last one is nucleic acids. When you think of nucleic acids, automatically think DNA/RNA. Okay, so nucleic acids are made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, but it has phosphorus. There is no sulfur. Okay, no sulfur in nucleic acids. So, what makes up? Well, if we look at our nucleic acids, it's made up of monomers we call nucleotides. All right. Nucleotides are our monomer. And we're going to learn more about this in the upcoming unit on DNA, but it has three main parts: a phosphate group, a deoxyribose sugar, and nitrogenous base. But that's for another time. For nucleic acids. Now, monomers are nucleotides, and there's four different ones that we're going to get to know: adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. But for our purposes in this particular unit, you want to just know what are the building blocks. So monomers is nucleotide. Our polymers are going to be nucleic acids, DNA and RNA. So our polymers are going to be DNA and RNA. Now, what's the function? Okay. Remember that DNA is located in the nucleus. But the key thing is that DNA holds all of the instructions for how the cell to operate. And those instructions also code or hold the information how to make the proteins needed to do many of the different things for our cells. And so the function of nucleic acids is genetic information and codes for proteins. So when we look at a structure of a DNA, okay, taking a look at this one, this constitutes a nucleotide. And that's because it has three parts to it. Here we have the phosphate group. Here we have the deoxyribose. And then here we have the nitrogen base. And that constitutes one nucleotide. Now, these nucleotides can form together by forming a good hydrogen bond between the nucleotide or between the nitrogenous bases, forming a base pair. Okay? But we'll talk about that in a later time. But note that when we talk about the backbone of the DNA, it's this right here, these phosphates and these carbohydrates. Yes, your nucleic acid is made up of carbohydrates themselves. All right, so let's go ahead and make sure we identify every single thing. Here, this is a triglyceride lipid because it has 1, 2, 3 of those fatty acid chains. Here, the building block for proteins are amino acids, and it has the amine group, central carbon, carboxyl group, and our variable group. Right here, what we have are monosaccharides or our glucoses, C6H12O6s, or anything with the OSC prefix. Here we have our polysaccharides. Again, this is a type of carbohydrate. And the main energy, again, what the cell utilizes first as its main. And that concludes our four major molecules that goes into creating our cells. Energy source.